Dejo esto aquí y ya
Antes de empezar, ¿verdad? Doy primero a ti la palabra.
Sí.
Take a seat in the center. Bien acelerado. Igual que yo. Sí, igual.
No, está prendido. Creo que sí.
No, porque si no tenemos que firmar lo otro de aviso de confidencialidad.
Pero dijo el chavo ahorita que se transmite y se graba.
Hace,
Pues es que me dijo que no se grabó. Pero si se transmite y se graba, sí se tiene que
si se tiene, es que si se graba, tiene que hacer todo un trámite.
Pero nada más es una hoja.
¿Sí?
¿Quieres que le diga a Graciela?
Pues si se puede.
Yo sí, que se grabe para tenerla disponible. Todos los materiales que
¿Que se graban de aquí, de los auditorios?
entonces no se necesita grabar, no se necesita firmar.
Pero no van a salir de Adriana.
Es que es ella. Soy a la que firma.
Necesito algo de Graciela. O le digo a esta Graciela que
¿Nos puedes ayudar allá a
Nada más me voy a entregar esto y me voy.
sí, o sea, todo. Ah, que tienes que sí.
All the events that we produce here are broadcasted. There will be a link to some people, some students can join the event, and they are recorded. If that's okay with you.
está bien. Entonces, ¿te parece si le escribo a Graciela para que me traiga que se dice para que pueda leer?
Puede ser en español. Nada más le tomo una foto. Ah, sí, está bien.
Y ya ella para que lo firme y que me lo pueda traer aquí.
O mañana. O tiene que ser aquí.
Exacto. Puede ser después. No hay problema. Te lo encargo.
Otra cosa que vamos a necesitar es ese formatito de clase.
Ah, sí, sí. Yo lo resuelvo, ahorita ya lo tengo ahí. Cuando termine, que nos firme dos.
Sí, vi el.
Sergio. Alberto. Los quiero presentar. Let's introduce you.
No, sí que se grabe. Ahí me platica.
Ya le dijo que no
¿Se va a transmitir?
¿Sabes qué? ¿Sabes qué pasa?
As you, here you can watch also, so you have that option. But it's up to you.
Can I see from there? Because something. Are you going to stand?
I'm going to stand just to
I can
say a
see
few
from
words.
here. I can see from there.
You can, wherever you feel comfortable, you can stay here.
There'll be some announcements first. So the students takes sometimes extra time for reasons related to traffic.
This is mine now.
It's yours.
This is
¿Quieres que iniciemos? ¿Quién? Se supone que algunos ya están aquí, no sé.
What's this about? Why did I have this? Oh, there we go.
Mira, son las 9:09. Un minutito más.
What's the name?
The other way.
Nada más cedo la palabra.
Sometimes I once downloaded an application that works like a timer.
No, porque
Change the colors, yellow and then red, like clean, clean, clean. Works somehow.
I noticed these are mostly graduate students. Sorry.
Undergraduate students, most of them. There are professors.
Okay. Okay. Nani,
Hola, muy buen día. Les damos una muy cordial bienvenida esta mañana a este auditorio, a esta universidad, a esta sala. Soy César Villanueva, profesor en el Departamento de Estudios Internacionales de esta universidad. Es un gusto realmente tener este evento esta mañana con la doctora Ronda Sajarna. En un momento más procederé a presentarla ya de manera más precisa y hablar un poco, introducir lo que nos va a compartir en términos de su conferencia, pero inicialmente quería darle la palabra a uno de nuestros asistentes académicos en la universidad, que tiene un anuncio sobre todo para los estudiantes. Rafael, adelante.
Muchas gracias, doctor. Bueno, no les quito mucho tiempo. Soy el maestro Rafael Ramírez y soy asistente de la coordinación de la licenciatura en Relaciones Internacionales. Vengo aquí con ustedes para invitarlos el día lunes 30 y el 31 de octubre a los eventos del aniversario del departamento y de la licenciatura. Y como tal, dentro de ellos va a haber una serie de talleres, 4 talleres de género, inteligencia artificial, que va a ser impartido por el doctor César Villanueva, otro de migración y cooperación internacional y protocolo diplomático. Entonces, aquí tengo algunos folletos, se los voy a pasar en unos momentos para que pues puedan tenerlos, ¿no? Y bueno, si requieren de mayor información, pues estamos en la coordinación para apoyarles. Y el método de inscripción está aquí en el código QR, solamente tendrían que escanearlo y ahí se inscriben. Va dirigido no solamente a estudiantes, sino también personal administrativo, personal académico, aspirantes a la licenciatura y estudiantes de otros departamentos. Bueno, ese es el aviso general y bueno, pero procedo a compartirles los folletos.
Muchas gracias, Rafael. Nada más también compartir con las personas que no son propiamente del Departamento de Estudios Internacionales que estamos celebrando el 25 aniversario del departamento propiamente y el 40 aniversario de la carrera, que fue la primera universidad en México que fundó la carrera privada, la primera universidad privada que ofreció la carrera de Relaciones Internacionales. Entonces, lunes y martes de la próxima semana es la celebración, están todas y todos invitados a este evento. Bueno, después de esto quiero también, voy a cambiar a inglés en un momentito más, pero de momento presentarles a Sergio Molano, que coordina la especialidad en promoción de paz y educación de la Universidad Iberoamericana. Ahorita les va a contar de ello. Es un colega muy cercano y este evento se realiza en colaboración con el Departamento de Estudios Internacionales y el Departamento de Estudios Interdisciplinarios. Sergio, muchas gracias por estar.
Muchas gracias, César. Muchas gracias por el evento, muchas gracias por la invitación, gracias por acompañarnos. Voy a platicar muy brevemente sobre la especialidad. Es una especialidad reciente, de nueva creación, que abre anualmente, y eso es una especialidad en educación y construcción de paz. Lo que buscamos es esto, formar personas que en diversos escenarios tengan la posibilidad de realizar proyectos pues de construcción y o de educación para la paz. Y justamente desde ese lugar, desde la especialidad está alojada en el Departamento de Reflexión Interdisciplinaria, y desde ese lugar es que nos permitimos, digamos, invitar a Ronda Sajarna que nos platique un poco sobre, bueno, pues ese tema que pues me parece muy pertinente, no solo en términos de paz, sino en términos, obviamente, de comunicación. Voy a hacer una breve presentación, les prometo que es breve. Déjenme ponerme los anteojos, porque si no, no veo nada. Voy a hablar en inglés por respeto voy a tratar de hablar en inglés por respeto a nuestra invitada. Espero que alguien me entienda en este espacio. Good morning to everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure to welcome you to this very special event at our university. We are very where we will be accompanied by the leading expert in international communication and public diplomacy, Ronda Sajarna. This event represents an important milestone in our academic calendar, and we are delighted to see the students, especially the teacher, and in general those of us who, for one reason or another, are interested in the topic of global communication. We have invited Ronda Sajarna to share a conference about communication, humanism, and public diplomacy, since those are topics of reflection that present departmental interests. In this effort, Cesar Villanueva has managed to integrate the efforts of 3 academic departments: international relations, communication, and interdisciplinary reflection. Thank you, Cesar. International communication is a vital discipline that underpins our global relationships. In an increasingly interconnected world, the way that countries and organizations communicate and present themselves to the world plays a critical role in shaping our future. Communication is the medium through which we express our humanity, our desire to understand each other, and to build bridges that connect different cultures and perspectives. Or, unfortunately, it can work the opposite. These topics are especially pertinent from the understanding of integral humanism, which, among others, seeks to develop a comprehensive approach to the person, transcending its dimension to consider it as a totality, and the call to transcendence that invites us to embrace human complexity, to recognize the multiple interconnections to all aspects of human life. Integral humanism invites people to transcend limitations and divisions to reach their full potential and contribute to the well-being of the world. It advocates a sense of purpose and commitment to constant improvement, both individual and collectively. Today, we have the privilege of learning from a true authority in this field. Ronda Sajarna has dedicated her career to research and understand how communication can influence international relations and diplomacy. Her experience and knowledge are invaluable, and her presence today represents an exceptional opportunity. In a world sometimes marked by division and challenge, Ronda reminds us of the importance of communication as a vehicle to mutual understanding and cooperation. We hope that this day is not only informative, but also inspiring, and that we can all take away valuable lessons about the importance of human communication in the international arena. I invite you to immerse yourself in this conference, ask questions, interact, and make the most of rich learning opportunity. Thank you for coming, and welcome.
That was very good. That was very good.
No, you
Now
can't.
we switch into English. Let me just begin by introducing you, Rhonda. As you see here, today's lecture has to do with communication and boundary spanners, which is particularly the title of one of her latest book, which is part of the presentation that we will hear today. One thing that everyone should know about Rhonda is that she got her education at a Jesuit university. She got particularly for our students in international relations, a degree from Georgetown University, a brother-sister university to us, in foreign service. So she knows very much about international relations and foreign policy. She also got her master's degree and her PhD at Columbia University in communication studies. And she has been particularly immersed in the academic world for the last 30 years, working as a full-time professor in different areas of communication. Nowadays, she's a professor at the American University in the School of Education. This is located in Washington, D.C. She's also a former Fulbright Senior Scholar, and currently she's a faculty fellow at the Center of Public Diplomacy at the University of Southern California. One of our colleagues from the University of Southern California, probably you have heard of him, Nicholas Cole, is just now having a presentation also in Mexico City at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He will be joining us later today and tomorrow if you have the time to talk and would like to talk to him. He's also a star in the field of diplomacy. Professor Zaharna has specialized in intercultural and international strategic communication. That's why this conference is also relevant for the students of communication. And she has a list of books that I will invite you to read in her biography, articles that are located to this, and we're trying to come up with a book in the coming months or a few years also. This is part of that dialogue. This is how you build academic life together, by inviting people, by presenting it to the students, by engaging in dialogues, which I'm very, very thankful, Rhonda, for you having taken the time to come and visit us. Having said this, this is just my pleasure to introduce you with her. And Rhonda, we will be happy to listen to your presentation, 30, 40 minutes. You say you wanted to stand up there, right?
I can sit, I can stand.
You can sit here? Okay. So this is it, and I invite you with a clap to please welcome Rhonda Zaharna to the university. The floor is yours, Rhonda.
I know you have to leave, but I have to thank you for that beautiful introduction because it sets it up perfectly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Close. Is this okay?
Yes.
All right. So I do want to thank Professor Sergio for that wonderful setup, because that's exactly what I want to talk about, is this connection and purpose and how to make the world a better place. And Professor Cesar, I have to thank you for working so hard to put this together. And I appreciate all that you've done. And I want to thank you for coming. It's an honor to be here today. And we're living in momentous times. The world seems to be spinning out of control. We're seeing social fractures, we're seeing divisions, we're seeing polarizations, not only internally but globally. We're seeing forced migration, people fleeing or being driven out, others seeking a safe place. We have health disparities, economic disparities, very rich and then others dying of hunger. And yet we have the most sophisticated communication tools. We have been studying communications for how many decades now? And yet, instead of using those tools to bridge, we're going back to the most primitive of tools, violence and building walls. More walls have been built since the Berlin Wall came down in 1989 than any time in human history. So I'm asking, what's going on? And what I want to do today is share some of the research that I have from the book that I've been working on. It's Boundaries as Spanners of Humanity. And I realized the need to expand the way we think about communication. I've spent decades studying and teaching communication and realizing that, wow, this is a problem. And so I want to share that. But at the end of each chapter, I put a call to the boundary spanners. And boundary spanners was a term that Brian Hawkins, he's a diplomatic scholar, that he used. And he was talking about professional diplomats that span governments and nations. While I was researching this book, I realized it's not just diplomats. The real boundary spanners now in the 21st century are you. They're people that are using social media. You're a boundary spanner by your travels, by your engagement with me here today. So I'm talking about boundary spanners, but I want to expand the way we think about boundaries. Usually when we think about boundaries, we're talking about lines that divide the differences. Those are the places where we put up the walls. I found in other traditions, boundaries is where people come together. That's where they would position the marketplaces. That's where they would bring all the goods to trade. And so there was a blending. So when I use the term boundary spanners, I'm talking about those who would find commonality among the rich diversity of our humanity. So I've titled my talk, Call to the Boundary Spanners. And this is a call to each of you during this momentous time. Each of you have an important role to play. And if you take away only one thing from my talk, it's just this. And it was told to me, but the world needs what only you were uniquely and divinely created to share with the world. And if I could repeat that, the world needs what only you were uniquely and divinely created to share with the world. I didn't realize that when I was at the university. I thought I was just taking classes and trying to get a good grade. Get passed. I didn't do so well in economics, though. But then I discovered communication. That discovery led to another, and a seed was planted. And I urge each of you to try to find that seed, because the world needs your insights. It needs your perspective. It needs your vision. I'm getting gray hair. We need some strong new vision. And so now to that overarching question, what's going on with communication and public diplomacy? These are the tools you think. And I did spend 3 years while I was working on my doctorate. I was at the UN for 3 years. And I got a chance to hear all of the different things that was going on in the world. But to go to that question of what's going on, let's go to the next slide. I want to share some of my background. Let's go to the next slide. I forgot to show the boundary spanners. Can we go? Does it go? It's going? So that's the boundary spanners. And here's what it is, those that would find commonality among the rich diversity. So each one of you is a boundary spanner. So to share some of my background. In the next, so that's me, high school graduation. growing up, my parents came from two different parts of the world. My mother was from Texas. My father was from the Middle East. My mother liked Christmas trees and cookies. My father liked food that my mother couldn't stand and she didn't know how to pronounce. He liked the mountains. She liked the shopping malls. He liked the beach. She wanted the swimming pool. Even as a kid, I get it. People are different. But then something weird. They could look at the exact same thing, a vase, and see two different things. One, it was odd. The other one said it's perfectly normal. One said it's rude. The other one says, well, that's the way it is. And so I'm thinking, what's going on here? I love languages. I was studying languages. And so for graduation, I wanted suitcases. I was going to travel the world and find out what's going on. And so then I went to Georgetown, and I was studying languages and international relations. I discovered communication, culture, international cultures, and I said, man, I've got it figured out. I've got it figured out. Next slide. Bummeroo. Then came 9/11, and I realized it's not just people who have problems. Nations invested in all this money, and professional diplomats have problems in communication. And so while I was studying communication, I started looking at public diplomacy, and I was called to testify 3 times before Congress, and each time they're asking me, what's going on, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. It seemed like they were doing everything right, but the more the public diplomacy was trying to get the message out, the more it seemed to be alienating the audiences. And anti-American sentiment soared. So I'm thinking, what's going on? And next slide. So I'm studying all of this, and so that's where I did the book, Battles to Bridges, on U.S. public diplomacy, trying to understand what was going on with U.S. Public diplomacy. But while I was studying that, and I was going deeper into the problem, I realized it wasn't just a matter of people and nations communicating differently. They appeared to have fundamentally different ways of thinking about communication. And so that's when I started on this next book, The Boundary Spanners of Humanity, trying to understand in different traditions, what is this thing? And some don't even call it communication, they call it relations. So I was doing that, and then I'm writing the book, next thing, there came the pandemic, and the world shut down. And I thought, again, public diplomacy and communication, we're going to get it right this time. We're going to use it to stem the flow or spread of this disease. We have all the tools. Next, and we're going to go kind of fast. The scientific community did just that. They started coming together using all of the network tools, crowdsourcing, setting up databases. Next, what happened on the other end? States or state leaders, on the other hand, appeared to become more focused on competitiveness. Rather than working together, we saw competition. Vaccine diplomacy. Next. And it's not only that public diplomacy failed the COVID test, it failed the humanity test. I think it's like 6 million, over 6 million have died. Next. So this was a second wake-up call. If 9/11 was one, we're now at a second wake-up call. And again, I'm asking myself, what's going on? And next, so during my research, one thing, I came across something interesting. This is from neuroscience. I did ancient I looked at ancient civilizations and all kinds of stuff. I did neuroscience. One thing I found in neuroscience is that there are 10,000 more neurons going from the brain to the eye. So the brain tells the eye what to look for. It's not that we see and then send information back. No, it's the other way around. We got this little radar, so I'm thinking, okay, what is my brain? What have I fed my brain? And what is it telling my eyes to look for? And so I went back and started looking at all of my communication models and theory. I've been teaching this for 30 years, what's going on. And it's all about separateness. Sender, message, receiver. They say they're linked, but you got to build that link. It's an individual level perspective. If we go to public diplomacy, it's separate countries, publics, even the others in the international arena are separate issues. So we're looking at this world, this idea of separateness. It was great in the 19th and 20th century. This is when culture came. This is when nation states were forming, colonials. It was great for carving up the world. If we step back now, we're in a world of connectivity. And historians and scholars have been saying, and as Professor Sergio said, we're becoming more and more and more and more interconnected. We can see this in, the next slide, is in trade. In the 2008 economic meltdown of the financial markets, political turmoil in one country, you've got refugees flowing to the other. We've got this connectivity. So, and some are saying hyper-connected. If anything stressed the interconnectivity of people, it was how fast the pandemic, how fast this virus was able to spread, and not being able to control. But the virus is also it's also a sign of how interconnected the issues are. And they're saying that the pandemic is related to climate change and that we can expect more. And it's not a matter of when is the next pandemic. But along with this connectivity, we've got diversity. And the world has always been blessed with great diversity of religion, of ethnicity, the way we look, the way we speak. And it's not something new, but when we take diversity and combine that with connectivity, we're going to get clashes. We'll get clashes. And there's a tendency that wall phenomena can be part of that result. But diversity's always been a source of friction, but it's also a source of innovation. This is where, because humans have always been faced with problems, and when you have the similarity or sameness, it's looking at the problem from the same angle, trying to solve the problem from the same style, the same thinking, and you get groupthink. But it's this diversity that brings one invention building on another, on another, on another. And if anything, and there's a wonderful book, Scott Page, who talked about how we need differences. And this is our source of creativity. And we need this diversity, especially now, with wicked problems. Wicked problems are problems that are so complex that if one tries to solve it, it can make it worse for the others. An example, a great example, again, is the pandemic. Some countries tried to take an individual and vaccinate only their own, which opened up the virus. Loved that. It was able to spread to the unvaccinated and mutate, and had a field day mutating. So those are the wicked. We're used to the tame problems. So we can go back. The tame problems are when there is, if the tame problem is you have water, you build a bridge, one country can do that, and that's great. The wicked problems are the ones, what do you do with rising sea levels? And there is Ben Ziegler, who wrote on the Collaborative Journal, he said that these problems are growing in frequency and intensity, that they're going to outpace our capacity to cooperate. So this is something to be aware. But wait a second, evolutionary capacity to cooperate. Next, I want to do a myth buster. I always heard that it was the survival of the fittest. Especially in international relations, it's about power. Even in communication, strategic communication, whose story's going to win? I thought that's what I had heard, and I heard that it was attributed to the biologist Charles Darwin. It wasn't. It was his rival Herbert Spencer. He was a sociologist, and this was the age of imperialism. So survival of the fittest just fit well with taking over peoples and colonizing and taking their land, their resources, because it was survival of the fittest, and these people were obviously weak. But what Darwin actually said was the feelings of sympathy that give the first impulses to benevolent, kind actions is the key to the human evolutionary survival. He said those communities, which include the greatest number of the most sympathetic members, those flourish the best, and they have the greatest number of offspring. This is what he said. Next. And you may have heard of the Neanderthal. But, when Homo sapiens, we weren't alone. Millions of years, we weren't alone. There was at least 4 other competitors. The Neanderthal were the big ones. They were the strong ones. But they lacked the capacity for cooperation. The big guys are no longer here. The Homo sapiens had this capacity for cooperation. And so the rest of our compatriots are gone, and we went. So, and this is, some are saying hyperkinetic. And you saw this during pandemic. During the pandemic, the first impulse was to go out and try to comfort. You had people going on their balconies, giving music. You had people going out and clapping and trying to support and encourage and help each others. Next, but it's not just people. This is the Harvard historian Akira Iri, and he wrote on the global community. And he said, and he was studying history of nations, and then he turned to international organizations, because he said the states are commanding the world stage, but off stage, it's all these international organizations that are doing a lot of the work. They've gone from like 8 organizations in the 19th century to now over 10,000, tens of thousands. Next, we saw this with the scientists. City diplomacy has now networked the NGOs, of course. So how can we expand our vision? How can we let this this lens of separateness and move to a lens of connectivity. How can we expand? Thankfully, we've got some help. With the exceptions of the ancient Greeks, many of the world's heritage have this lens of connectivity. They think in terms of connectivity. And we're seeing this come in what is, I would call, humanity-centered approaches. And I want to include Professor Cesar's work in 2010 on cosmopolitan public diplomacy. It's thinking about not just states' diplomacy and their goals, and let's go to the next slide. State-centric diplomacy is a lens of separateness. It's that rational actor, state goals, trying to achieve their individual goals. Humanity-centered, which you speak about in cosmopolitan diplomacy, and others have spoken in different things. It's this humanity level. It's a global perspective, and it's inherently collaborative. So I'm going to move on to, so let's talk about how do we, when I say public diplomacy, I'm thinking also about international communication. How can we expand it? I teach strategic communication, and it's all about advocacy. It's all about getting the message out. It's all about having that client and getting that winning story. But I want to say we need to expand the lens. The first thing we need is problem solving. What does communication look like if it's problem solving? It's not about messages and winning. How do we think about communication as problem solving? Through a lens of connectivity. Because again, it's not just my message. The problems are not. And I need different perspectives to untie them. So, some examples. Interactive gaming. During the pandemic, I don't know if y'all are aware of it. If maybe, I don't know how many gamers we have here. But the major companies got together because the World Health Organization was having a problem they wanted to get people. Gaming is a problem-solving tool. And they jumped in, and they did this whole initiative. It's called Play a Part Together. And it was a thing to get people involved in ways to mitigate or stop the spread of the virus. And they all join in that. Another example, museums. Museums have done on climate education, and it's trying to involve and alert people and different aspects of problem solving. Next. So how can we develop communication is collaborative problem solving. How can we think about that? Yes, next. Mediating identities. Wow. Let's go to the mediating identities. How can we think about mediating identities, communication? Not just because we think of identity of communication, it's about sharing our identity and creating this wonderful image. Well, that's all nice and fine for you. But identities, and let's go. This is a different one. Well, it can bring clashes. When we think that our identity is singular and distinctive, that just Mexican, or I say Texan, or it sets it up. But if we look at identities as fluid, as plural, as overlapping, as intersectional, this expands the way we think about identity in communication. It's not about me projecting my identity, But in terms of connectivity, it's finding and making space and creating connections there in terms of shared identity, plural identities. And this is from, she's not here, but Professor Guadalupe. This was her PhD dissertation. And this was indigenous video games, and they wanted to expand and explain identities in plural, and this was an indigenous video game of Never Alone. This is a Japanese maestro who brought together musicians that were involved in the Balkan conflicts, Serbs, Croatians, Muslims, and it was this image of seeing these identities and uniting through music. Next. So how can we develop collaborative approaches to mediating identities? Next. Another, mediating public emotions. If we look at international relations, international communication, there are these rational actors, which is cool. But when you look at publics, you know, they're humanoids, and we have emotions. And so the idea that communicating without emotion is just phenomenal. So empathetic. This is empathetic, that we're able to perceive and recognize emotions in public and not just acknowledge them. Check. Now you have to actually respond to them. So this was an example of this was the British monarch, bless her heart. She did speak to people's emotions that, you know, this is kind of scary, folks. But we're going to get through it, giving encouragement. Next. So how can we develop approaches for having a conduit or for channeling and responding to public emotion? Next. Finally, I struggled with this. I want to say I'm so over conflict mediation because it puts the focus on conflict. And forgive me, I'm only half American. So, but this idea that in the U.S. there is a thing it's this conflict is natural. In fact, it's healthy and normal and it's good for you. I don't know. I find it kind of painful, and it hurts. And most people try to avoid it. Even all my students, and they say, oh, it's healthy, it's good for you. But then why are you avoiding it? Because it's too painful. So instead, I think there's good relations for the sake of good relations. And really, it's good relations for the sake of, you know, healthy mental health, less stress. It's more prosperous for nations. So how can we build good relations for the sake of good relations? And next, and they're seeing this, and we are seeing this in lots of places. This is one in India, Pakistan. There's one I found in Cyprus and Greece. Finding it all over, but they are building relations for the sake of good relations. This is a virtual portal. This was created to try to bring people together just to build relations. So we're getting close to the end. So how can we expand our vision from a lens of separateness? We got that down good. How can we expand it even to develop the mindset that fits with our technology? These things are the most connected things. But the things holding it, if my brain is in a separate mindset, this thing is like, you know, it's there. So how can we develop that connective brain to serve the needs of humanity in our shared planet? Next. Oh, no. Yeah. So I think I'm at, so So that is, let me end again with a call to the boundary spanners. My passion has been communication and diplomacy. And so this has been the foundation of my story. And as I leave you, I want to leave you to write your story. I didn't know the seeds, and I didn't know culture, communication, or any of that. And I don't know what's down your line. But I leave you to write your story and to find your seed. And again, that thing, the world needs what only you were divinely and uniquely created to share with the world. And I encourage each of you to find that seed and grow it. So thank you. Thank you for letting me share some of my thoughts with you. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. So thank you.
It's 9:54. We have good enough time to engage in a conversation with you, Rhonda. It is very provoking, and at the same time, extremely balanced the way you present communication with diplomacy, which seem to be natural fields of connectivity. Diplomats communicate, but perhaps what you bring to the fore is the content of that communication, if it tends to conflict and individuality and egotism, or if it expands into a broader channel, trying to reach out to humanity. I really love the idea of the boundary spanners, which is the title of the book, because it really reflects this ambition to go beyond the traditional discourse related to both diplomacy and communication. By the way, let me ask the four here, how many students are international relations students? Could you raise your hand, please, just to know? Oh, half the
corner.
group. That corner here. And students of communication? No students of communication? They are missing here. I wrote to the Department of Communication, and our director knows about this. It's not good that they are not here this morning. But anyways, and the rest are students in the area of sorry? Hospitalidad.
Wonderful.
Oh, well, it connects to some extent. I guess you found the message also meaningful for you. And this is what it's truly important, I guess, at the end of the talk. Let me mention one aspect that catches my attention, Rhonda. A lot of what you say, you didn't use the word peace, but throughout the conversation, the word peace appears in different manners, because it has to do with calling up for an understanding of how we build relations. You also mentioned a little bit the anthropology of the cooperation. I have to say that Rhonda Saharna's husband is a neurologist. He happens to come to this trip for the first time to Mexico, and he's now in a conversation with the Ministry of Health. He's an expert on neurology. So what she explains to us today connects also with the idea of how we are as humans in terms of anthropology. And as I said, you didn't mention the idea of peace up front, but all what you comment, all what you reflect upon in your talk, it's to some extent to building relationships that lead to be in peaceful in a peaceful space, in relations that produce equilibrium to some extent. So that would be my first response to what you say. I have a few questions, but I would let our public today to ask some questions first, our students. I'm sure there should be some questions, and our professors. So if anyone has comments first or would like to add something, let me go first here with you. Yes. Mariana, please.
Thank you, Dr. Tajarna. It was really inspiring. I wanted to ask you, you talk about how a lot of cultures have a non-individual perspective, and you said that except Greeks. and I think it's really important because as in our major Occidental culture, we stay to the Greek values. And I wanted to ask you how individualism as a main value in our Occidental culture has in some ways lead to this lack of connectedness. And I'm not from diplomacy, but I'm very interested in that field and from literature. So I wanted to know how this enters in the diplomacy studies, like we have as an Occidental culture a lack of perspective in understanding other cultures that link more with the ideology of community. Well, it's not an ideology, but even the idea of community and building peace and communication through that like visual way of seeing the world in a community perspective.
That's a great reflection. Do you want to answer question by question, or should we take 2 or 3 questions and you answer? What do you prefer?
I'll get lost.
Let's go by one by one.
But time me if you want. Okay, I'll time it like that. Okay, we can do that.
We have time. It's no
Okay.
problem.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to go, and there is a slide there where I had all the different, the cultural things, and I think I'm excited. I want to go to the Museum of Anthropology, and there's a sunstone, and it's all interconnected. It has the different years and the things. It's all interconnected, and it's connected with the physical and the spiritual, right? I did neuroscience, but I also went back to all the ancient traditions, and there was the Egyptian, and the Chinese. There was the sunstone. They were all interconnected. The physical, the social, how I physically do, the natural sciences, the emotional, and the gods. They were all interconnected. If I was mean to you, the gods would see it, and then we'd have a flood. So it's all interconnected. The Greeks came and broke it and said, no, we're not going to do the whims of the gods anymore. We're done with that. It's going to be natural science, and we're going to separate them from the gods. And this was like, wow, that's really cool. And so this is how this is where the individualism and the connectedness. I just went off on a tangent there, but this is the thing of the separating out. Another thing that's really interesting about the Greeks is they were model makers. They love making models, and for models, they would break into categories. And this had to go in this category, and this goes in this category, and this, well, we don't know. It kind of looks like this, but it's got stuff written on it. It's white, but this, and so, but it still had to go in separate categories. And so this is this individual and separateness thinking. So I spent over 10 years working on this, and so I just love doing those little rabbit holes. They call it rabbit hole because I just start thinking about one and the other, but does that kind of get it different ways? So we can go back to that thing of like, well, wow, what if we really are still connected to the gods? I don't know.
And we have Emilio Coral, who is also a graduate from Georgetown University. He studied there.
Oh, but Chinese, I think you.
No.
No, okay.
Emilio, professor also here.
Thank you very much for this very enlightening conference. I was wondering, while you were speaking about all these perspectives of increasing collaboration and the necessity of getting involved in public diplomacy, new perspectives of developing networks and emotions and creative approach in terms of expanding the way people can correlate and create collaboration and cooperation. But to what extent all these aspects that you are developing and proposing sort of challenge the boundaries of public diplomacy and maybe demand more creative perspectives that maybe are in different arenas of nation branding maybe, or many other perspectives that are not precisely public diplomacy, but are something more flexible, more open to incorporating arts, culture, of course communication, but in a more flexible way. Sometimes public diplomacy is perceived as something more traditional, more in terms of protocol, but in today's world where we have all these conflicts in the Middle East, between Russia and Ukraine, maybe we need new tools and new perspectives in terms of psychology, in understanding different cultures, and maybe the rational perspectives are not very helpful trying to understand and resolve these kind of conflicts. So I was wondering to what extent all these you are proposing go beyond some boundaries of public diplomacy.
Thank you, Professor Emilio. I couldn't agree more. Yes, absolutely. And I love our international studies. They've got the hard part. But did I hear the hospitality? Where's our hospitality people? Yes. Tourism, one of the fastest growing fields, right? And if you look at tourism, they're doing that exact same thing. Come to our country. Be a guest, welcoming, promoting, showing the good things of the country, and if anything, connecting and boundary spanning, and then you never know who's going to stay at your hotel and who loves your country, and they can go back and get different ideas. And also we have, as I said, the states may be on the center stage, but we've got activists. And if the states may be slow, we have a lot of young people that are not going to watch the earth melt down. And there are going to be a lot of parents that don't want their children growing up with disease and poverty, or they're going to be flooded out or something. So yeah, and that's why I'm very cautious. I don't put either this or that because I will get shot down, and I regularly get shot down. Yeah, so I put approaches. It's but one approach. That's it. So, hope that helps.
Let me mention quickly that Professor Coral teaches the diplomacy here at the Department of International Relations, and the protocol and all that has to do with the ritual of diplomacy. So your question was very much to the point. But let me go back to what Mariana Iglesias, who is also a professor in the Department of Interdisciplinary, what is it, the other part? Me cuesta trabajo traducirlo al español. Studies. I guess one really good tension that you mentioned, Mariana, has to do with approaches that go more individualistic and much more what Rhonda and I think of social sciences, diplomacy, communication, which is more holistic. So it's a tension between individualism or individualistic approaches to society, to communication, to diplomacy, to international relations, and a more holistic approach to that, in which interconnectivity has to do with that. That makes me think on two aspects that I want to put on the table also, and a question, and I will open up again to the public. As you probably listen, Mexico today, Rhonda, is undergoing a very deep crisis today as we speak in the area of Acapulco, because there was you heard about that probably, a hurricane level 5 that hit the coast. This is a very strange thing that happened, because in just 12 hours it went from a tropical storm to a level 5 hurricane, and the level of crisis there is really, really high. One cannot stop thinking that these things do not happen just individually. I'm trying to go back to the discourse about nature and human resources and natural resources, and the whole idea of nature and how it operates. We sometimes in the individualistic discourse tend to think that it's only us at the local level or at the individual level what matters. But constantly nature shows us that this connectivity is there. And I'm not talking about gods or religion. I'm talking about connections related to pollution, connections related to exhaustion of the resources that we deal with. Do you see some, and this is my question, do you see some connection in terms of what we need to do as individuals in order to achieve this higher holistic understanding of humanity? How, particularly, how do we reach there? What is, going to the last part of your presentation, how do we start writing our own stories to connect to the broader humanity? That would be a little bit my reflection and question.
Thank you. And yeah, that's devastating news on and how fast it can change and how helpless. You know, that's a paradox. We think of how helpless we are, but really we're not. We have the tools. We have the capabilities. We have the brains. We got AI, for God's sake, now. That and I love that you can put things in and chat with it. It's not just Google checking it up. You can chat with it to get different perspectives and challenge it. So I think that's there. We're not helpless. It's the mindset. It's changing the mindset. And I want to say I'm late to the party, because I think people have been doing this. You have activists, climate activists, health activists, economics. You've got activists around the world. You've got NGOs around the world that have been beating the drums, trying to get people's attention. And I have faith that they'll get it. Either that or we'll all be underwater and then it won't matter. So, sorry.
I was just thinking on Katrina, remember, in the United States, or Gilberto that we had here before. Yes, we have been through this before.
And we're going to go through more. They're increasing in frequency and intensity.
But probably we need to understand that this is exactly, the mode of thinking is not individualistic, but it's more going into how we can solve problems, how we can be not part of the problem, but part of the solution. I think that's a little bit where we're navigating. But let me open back to you. Anyone would like to have a comment or a question? Profesor, adelante, Alberto.
Sorry, because my English is so bad.
Oh, my Spanish is.
I want to thank you your excellent perspectives, your in this Bayesian approach in the world of today. I want to question you. What do you recommend, in particular, to students, university students today?
Thank you. So why the? Huh?
I was actually going to, in the same idea, let me expand in the same idea. What specific tools would you recommend for students like the ones we have here to go from the more individualistic approach to the cellular phone, me, myself, and I, and this idea in which probably the pandemic also taught us that what is to be closed, just being preoccupied for our own health, for our own security. How do we break that in today's world and expand? This can be a solution too, but how would you see from this approach that are for the students like ours, bachelor students, how can we break through the idea of individualism into a more holistic approach, of broader approach? If that is a little bit what you...
Thank you, Professor Alberto. I'm thinking, just asking the thing of what, I know what this looks like, what I'm teaching. I'm thinking now as a professor, I know what this looks like from a lens of individualism. How can I look at this again through the lens of connectivity? How can I look at my notes and say, okay, this is what it looks like in terms of rigid concepts. How might this look in terms of connectedness? And how can I connect it to things I haven't connected to before? And I'm trying to think of something, I'm trying to think of like maybe diplomacy and connection, or I'm just trying to think, but just how can I look again, if my phone is connected, how can I mentally think in terms of connection? How can, instead of individual states, how can I think, and this is what's amazing, is we tend to think of, okay, it's this state, and then forgetting, now that we're all connected, this state way over here that nobody even thought about, that's going to run in, because now we're all connected. And they could have the thing that these two big states never, and I'm thinking that was a wonderful thing that happened in Libya. Libya, and it was the Europeans, but then China came and looked at more of an interconnected perspective, how it was, and there were wonderful studies that expand the vision to look for connectedness, because public diplomacy is very much about the state, the specific, and sending to a target public, which is great, but it's really the influence of all the others. So I'm just thinking of that. And I'm just thinking also of realizing the effect of the pandemic, how it really messed up our brains, that social isolation, that somehow that's not normal. And the quarantine, people dying and not being able to do anything, or not even, and just being frozen there. That's not normal. And it's like a big wound. It's going to take time to heal. But my husband does regenerative medicine, and if you cut your hand, there may be a scar, but there's going to be skin that grows up again. And that's where modern medicine is going back to regenerative medicine. because the pharmaceuticals are one pill for this, and one pill for this, and one pill for this. And you study the brain, you study anatomy, you study the liver, but when you put all those things together, you have side effects. So anyway, connectivity, medicine, thinking about connectivity. So, resilience.
Yes, resilience.
Resilience and that evolutionary capacity to cooperate. It's there.
Two thoughts there quickly, Rhonda. One is, one has to remind ourselves that the pandemic ended in April this year, officially, worldwide. So up until very recently, we still had a lot of measurements to protect ourselves, and we were still, and now as we speak also, there is a new wave that is pending there that maybe we should be again careful because, and I think, yes, the pandemic ended, but since perhaps consequences of many things we have done in the past, we might come back to other types of challenges that we as humanity have to be confronted with. Perhaps a second question I had, Rhonda, to this is, could you give us one specific example of how to apply this, be that in a context of a community, if you have worked with that? So we have an example, because we have been talking about the general aspects, the things that inspire in the abstract level, but would you have one example of a country or one example of a community where this actually applies? And finally, the second thought that I didn't want to leave, I'm not in conflict with the cell phones of any kind, just as Rhonda said, or artificial intelligence, the use, I think we should use it, and we should use it as a tool in our classrooms. But also to learn when it's appropriate to have a use of it and in what conditions it will be helpful and not a distractor to the connectivity we're trying to have all together. I think we need to re-educate. It's not that we think that this is bad or not. I think it's a tool that is absolutely necessary. By the way, the new designs of the cell phones are not going to come with the screens as we know them, because it's been proven by scientific research that the light that the cell phones take out to our eyes and to our brains have certain effects in our attention to the reality. So there are now studies on how this is going to change, and you will see it, I'm sure in your generation this will happen. But going back to the example, Rhonda, is there one or two examples that you could share with us where this specific idea of communication that you mentioned has roots and can really see it firsthand, as an example?
You had 3 questions there, 3 things. My cell phone is on black and white. And especially before it, I mean, if I have it's good for picture taking because you get great compositions because it just has, but yeah, because it overstimulates, especially when I want to wind down at night. So I make sure I keep it black and white, and you could do that through accessibility. So that's it. So we're already there.
Remember, your husband is a neurologist, so
but I taught him.
You say it for a reason.
So, but yeah, because it just is really stimulating. But you also said that the pandemic ended. Maybe it ended physically. Maybe it's out of the news and we have our next crisis. But I don't think that it's ended mentally. And I can see it at my university, the students. We just have a very high, just the stress, the layover stress of just getting back to being human again. That's taking time, because that was just such but we're resilient, but yeah, it's maybe we ended it physically, but we have to keep really working hard to get back to being human. And I will give you a wonderful example, and this comes from one of my colleagues. We have a whole gaming department. I love gaming. But we have a whole gaming department, and one of my colleagues has written, has a book called Locally Played, and it's how gaming is being used to create community. And they have even a mobile truck that goes out into communities, and they play games, and there are video games and other games that are done for creating connection. And it's specific. We think of gaming as the old style one of who could punch each other out and which monster gets to eat. But there is a whole, set, they're pro-social gaming. And so gaming to create these social skills, to reconnect us with our social skills. Because that was the evolution. That was our evolutionary thing. We're not Neanderthal.
Last round of questions or comments. We're about to finish now. Yes, Santiago,
Santiago.
student of our...
When you were talking about mediating identities,
Yes.
I found very interesting, but like a problem came to my mind, like how, for example, I want to do like the Balkan Orchestra or a project like that. How do I go without acting like I'm superior, in a sense, like I as a superior culture want to elevate yours to my level?
What says that my level's not inferior?
No, I know. But like, okay, it's maybe.
No, but see, that's the thing, that superior and inferior, that's a mindset of separateness.
It's like when you put the game, like a lot of games came to my mind that want to explore in a culture on certain topics, and a lot of people is like, oh yeah, the United States is coming to elevate to get to know this culture, and it's not well transcribed sometimes. So would you say just do it and people will talk, or maybe do it this certain way or this certain way?
No, Santiago, I would say do it differently and do it your way. Do it differently and do it your way. You see what doesn't work, and that's what I mean for finding your seed. Look what's not working in your world. Look at what's not making sense in your studies. Because I hate to tell you, humans wrote those books. And the reason there's 1,000 in the library is because they didn't all get it right the first time, and they're still working on it. So what you see is not working, find out and do it differently. Do it differently. That's all.
And let me add something to it. It's a very interesting question, and I think it has a plurality of possibilities to answer it. But let me give you an example. I was thinking last semester what course to teach this semester, where I would feel that something new that I could learn and something new that I could share with my students. And I've been teaching certain courses, traditional courses, but I thought since the pandemic officially, by the World Health Organization ended in April, so that's officially, I wanted to go back to something that I think moves a lot of us in terms of emotions. And then I put on a class on emotions and cinema, because one way to connect directly with your emotions is cinema or the arts, but on the same token. And the course is going on now. We submerge ourselves into that. What I'm trying to say here is that this is a very emotional moment in history. since we're ending up a pandemic, I think we professors, as professors, but also you as students, have to take care of your emotions. A lot of things are coming up, and one way of reacting to today's moment as a human being, as a student, is to observe those emotions, to analyze what those emotions are telling us from ourselves and in relation to the society we're living, the reality we're immersed into, and transform those emotions into positive actions that with the objectives we are setting. Probably universities are not learning the message that this is a very emotional moment. We are going back to universities just as business as usual, but what Rhonda was saying in terms of gaming, for instance, it would be an excellent idea to ask universities to go back and play, to some extent provoke some activity through games in which the community engages back again into laughing, talking, drinking coffee. Those aspects can start to change the mode of the universities today. So I like what you say in relation to how to go back to that. I think the emotional part today is a very important part of what's happening in the world.
Can I? Oh,
Yes,
can
go
I
ahead.
yes, Indigo. I just did a piece. One of the last things I've written was with a PhD student in Canada. And she wrote on, her specialty is cultural diplomacy and museums. And she talked about this museum. It's the Museum of Immigration in Melbourne, Australia. And instead of just having identity, what she had is she talks about plural identities, and she talks about this educational exhibit where the youth tour the museums with marginalized or underrepresented artists. And so they go back and forth and they talk about what they're seeing. So it's not one perspective, one identity. They've realized, wow, they're plural identities, they're intersectional identities, and they expand. And so there's different ways, yeah.
One last question or comment, any of the students here?
Well, then I will have one question, and anybody can answer it. What is one thing that you could change? Or one thing that you would like to change? No, yeah. I was going to say from, but yeah, you. I was going to say from the students I haven't heard.
Okay, well,
I'm always after that. I teach team thing. Yeah, one thing, because I've seen some eyes looking. I've seen some brains going off. One thing, one thing, one thing. You're happy? Okay. A perspective?
A lot of perspectives.
You change a lot of different perspectives. Anything else? Anything else? More open, or what? How would you change a perspective? Okay, perspective. I'll go with perspective. Anything else? Anything else you would change? You would like to change or see changed? One banana, two. Hospitality.
Well, I would like to change the way I react in some aspects. When I have a discussion with another person, I tend to be a little violent.
Uh-huh.
So I would like to change the way I am.
So you'd like to be calmer and just like centered. Okay. Anything else that you would like to change? Anything else you would change? What? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
think I would like to change the part of myself. Like instead of receiving the emotions, I would like to just observe them, as he said, and kind of understand where they are coming from, and just feel them, not in a bad way, like not react to them.
That's a wonderful thing. It's like they're house guests that come and knock on your door, and you just kind of say, "Hi, what are you here to tell me?" And let them there, and you just observe them.
Exactly.
And then you just tell them goodbye. And they'll be like the clouds, they'll float away. They really will. Yeah. What else? What are you going to change? What are you going to change? Yes, 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 yes. You know that look. What are you going to change? What are you going to change? Anything? Yeah, you keep looking behind. Yeah. The way of seeing the world? So you can see the positive stuff, not just the negative? Yeah, that can be positive, the negative. Anything? Thank you. Yeah, anything?
Not being a bystander.
Not being a bystander.
Don't wait for anyone else to make a change.
So that you would be that change. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe like trying to help a little bit more I don't know, like people in like natural disasters or in war, something that trying to be a little bit more helpful.
So being more helpful, responding. This is why it's been such an honor to be here. I am so moved by your sharing, and thank you. And I think that y'all will. I think that y'all will. So go out there and do it. And thank you.
Let me, before you go, I don't want to leave the, I really want to listen to Emilio. What would you change, Emilio,
What would you change?
as a closing?
It was important to listen to the students, but in my perspective, the capacity of collaborating, cooperating, opening to new perspectives. Collaboration and cooperation, I think, is key in today's world.
It
You have
is.
to try to resolve to some extent some of the high caliber conflicts that we have, very violent conflicts. We need cooperation more than ever.
More than ever. Here, here.
And I want to ask you for a favor. I have an assistant to one of my classes, and she was supposed to help me in organizing today's event, but she has been very sick, and she had to go to the doctor this morning, and she wasn't able to come up here. Some of my students know her. Her name is Violeta. So I need to run up to the Cancilleria, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in a few seconds to get Nicholas Cole.
Oh.
And Violeta was to introduce the university to Rhonda, but she's not here today. So I wanted to ask any of you, if you have the time, to show around your university to Rhonda. It's the first time she's in Mexico. It's the first time she's at the university. So if any of you have a few minutes to take her around and just show her the different spaces, I would particularly appreciate that from our community. Yes?
I can do it.
Can you do that? Thank you very much. What's your name again?
Sophia.
Sophia, thank you. So just come up here. Thank you for showing up, and we'll see you around. Remember, Monday and Tuesday we'll have a celebration. You are invited to for the International Studies Department. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Marina, for your support. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take it to your office.
Yes.
I'm just going to go around and then just, but it's there, I guess I can just go in.
Yes, no problem. I'll show you.
Thank you.
I feel resonance. And I
Oh, sure.
Yo también.
Muy bien. Nos vemos en...
Hospitality.
Pero pues, ya, yo creo que sí.
Nice to meet you. I really enjoyed it. So welcome, Sophia.
Ahora para acá, mi Sofía.
Thank you very much. Sí, perdón.
Learning a lot of you and I appreciate all your knowledge and your help. You are so kind.
Con los estudiantes. Una alumna es que la estoy llevando a ver los
Profesor
es que como esta es esta se va.
Gracias. Sí, porque es Santiago que ya se ofrecía y Sofía se ofrecía a llevarla a conocer. Estaba preocupado que quién se quedaba, pero mira, también. Llegué justo a tener esa
Justo a tiempo. Thank you. I appreciate your questions and appreciate your attention. Yeah.
No, I appreciate all your knowledge.
Tú eres de relaciones. Perdón.
Another question.
No
Yeah.
tienes clase después.
Since you started us off. Oh, wait, there you were smiling. You didn't smile the other Okay.
Y
All right,
es
good.
un recorrido muy simple. Quizá primero habría que ir al apartamento para que vean el mismo, porque ahí vamos a empezar y ahí van a regresar. Para que ya se siente un poco de trabajo.
Well, I see y'all tomorrow or at the lunch or where is
¿Qué
that?
se gusta?
I mean,
I'll be in the class.
¿Qué materia
do you all have
estás
cards? So, but, yeah, I have my email.
Otherwise, you guys will be
Thank you.
I do, for sure.
Vamos a organizar lo último.
Whose is this up?
Your classes are here. Telephone is there.
So, and she knows.
Oh, let me introduce you to Ron de Sahara,
Okay.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Natalia. I'm the master student.
Oh, okay.
master's student in communication.
Oh.
She's also working and she was listening to the conversation.
Yeah,
I would like
I just wanted to drop by and say hi and thank you for the insights. And it was very helpful for me because I'm actually studying diplomacy.
Oh, that's a big
it was,
one.
Yeah, it was a very nice conversation, even though if I did interact with you.
Thank you. Thank you. And we will see you
a
later.
estar aquí.